Record. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Evan Scrimshaw. I have wanted to record a politics edition of this since the election, but haven't been able to make the time work. But there's some trade law news, so I have to have my guy on, Robert Glasgow, partner at McCarthy's. Um, Trade law guy. Should we introduce you first? And yeah, no, say hi to everybody, and then we will do the many disclaimers.
Hi, Evan. Great to be back. It's always fun to be able to just chat about the politics of the situations that are going on, especially post-election, post-throne speech, and now just post Donald Trump having his entire tariff regime thrown into the trash bin by the Court of International Trade in the U.S.
So the plan for this episode is going to be about 20-ish minutes on the tariff stuff, 20 plus minutes or 20-ish minutes on tariffs, 20 plus minutes on the throne speech, aka Rob explains to me why my crash out was completely unjustified. Um, and then 20 minutes on some election stuff, thoughts that you haven't gotten out in any other vehicle. I would like to disclaim a few things. One, Rob is not your lawyer. None of this constitutes legal advice. Number two, Rob is not a U.S. lawyer. So his opinions on this and the statements made are reflective of informed opinion, but they are not fact. They are not certainty. He is not an American lawyer. I would like to make this very clear. And number three, any opinions that he is expressing are personal opinions and they are not made on behalf of or in the name of his employer, even though congratulations on being, a partner at one of Canada's seven sisters.
Thanks, Evan. I think that quite rightly sets out the parameters of the disclaimers.
Basically,
I don't
nobody.
know if you just
Basically, you're
want
not
me.
allowed to yell at Rob for what he said. Well, no, you are allowed because I also have a fun game at the end. You're allowed to yell at him for those opinions. You're not allowed to yell at him for any of his other opinions.
No, that's fine by me. And to be fair, you can yell at me for opinions. You just can't sue me over opinions. Yelling at me, that's fine. I get yelled at by everybody, so it's totally fine. Uh, so I don't know. Just want me to jump into the tariff situation and what happened just a few hours ago?
Yeah. So what? So we're recording this Wednesday, so I'll hopefully be up Thursday morning. What happened? Like, is this a shock or are we surprised? Um, is there a mechanism for Trump to undo this? Is this just going to the Supreme Court? Or is the fate of the global economy in A.B. Cody Barrett's hands? Go.
So kind of. So we have in the U.S.
Reassuring
also.
thoughts already.
So there's a couple of factors here. The first one is, of course, all this is happening in the context of some reporter trying to single-handedly destroy the U.S. economy by telling Trump about the acronym TACO for Trump Always Chickens Out, which immediately set Trump off, and he started getting very, very bullish on what he was going to do. But then in the afternoon, we had a ruling from the United States Court of International Trade. And the Court of International Trade, or the CIT, is the federal court that adjudicates civil actions that arise out of U.S. customs and international trade laws. And there have been a long-standing complaint by several different plaintiffs to the CIT that Trump's tariffs, namely the fentanyl tariffs and what we would call the reciprocal tariffs, the Liberation Day tariffs, were unlawful. These were tariffs that were enacted under a U.S. statute called IEEPA, which gives the president fairly broad powers to take actions and executive actions for international emergencies. And Trump first with fentanyl said that the drug trade was an emergency that required him to take executive action. And then he said that the U.S. trade imbalances were another emergency requiring him to invoke IEEPA to establish his reciprocal tariff policy. IEEPA has the benefit, if you're Trump, of allowing him to take just completely unilateral action. There's lots of other statutes and mechanisms the president can use to impose tariffs. I mean, we see one in the steel and aluminum tariffs and in the, I believe, the automotive tariffs, which I believe were both enacted under Section 301 of the Trade Expansion Act. No, sorry, those are 230s of the Trade Expansion Act, which are about national security. The problem with the other powers Trump has is that they're subject to review. They require extensive investigation by investigatory agencies. They require reporting, and I believe they require eventual congressional oversight to confirm the tariffs or allows Congress greater powers to intervene and prevent the tariffs. The advantage of IEPA is the president gets to just do whatever he wants. There's no real oversight, there's no real check. And that's
If
why
that's
he
true,
could.
then how the hell are we getting judicial review on this?
So that's why, because they're not really bringing the review under IEPA. So we saw a couple of ways that people tried to attack it. The first was in the Senate, where they passed a resolution declaring that Canada wasn't a fentanyl emergency. And that was trying to lay the groundwork for one attack on this, which is that there's not an emergency. And theoretically, if there's not an emergency, there's no jurisdiction to invoke IEPA. What these litigants did, the most successful attack, and the one that I think this bodes well down the line. Now we're talking about Amy Coney Barrett, but I think actually this might actually end up in Gorsuch's hands for the reason I'm going to go into, which is they went through the judicial kind of the legislative history of IEPA, and it's the statute that came before it. On that was the Nixon era statute that was replaced by IEPA to draw a textual argument, which is a type of argument for the listeners who aren't legals and obsessed with the U.S. and to a lesser degree Canadian law. Textualism is an originalist argument that says what we should be doing is carefully reading the text of a bill to interpret what the framers what their intent was, and that intent is set in stone. And it's not like a living tree that grows and changes, but is a set in stone text. And
Which is
textualism is
also
very.
I will just interrupt to say, which is also a useful legal doctrine for when people fuck up the drafting of a bill, which you'd think wouldn't happen, but yet frequently does. Like they forget a comma or they forget a knot that's supposed to be in there. And it's like it's very funny to me just how frequently court cases hinge on whether or not the court wants to take the literal meaning of the literal words on the page for versus Congress's very obvious intent.
Yeah, and so what this argument is a very conservative approach to use textualism. It's something that it's a strain of originalism that's considered a very strict form of originalism, and it's a judicial philosophy that's actually reasonably well followed by Neil Gorsuch. You know, there's a lot to dislike about Neil Gorsuch as a progressive, but he is actually fairly consistent in his textual reading, and there have been cases where he's reached what many would consider especially progressive or liberal conclusions by applying a textualist reading of legislation or most especially treaties in a lot of indigenous law cases in the US. And so in a lot of ways, this focus on a textual argument is
Oh wow, the Jays actually did
building.
something. Wow. Sorry, I have the Jays game on. They just hit a 2-run home run. I'm stunned.
This is kind of proofing the eventual appeal down the line for that kind of audience, for a more conservative Federalist Society judicial audience, by making an argument that's pitched to them. And what the argument is if you look at the language of IEPA, that the language is that they're allowed to regulate international trade. But if you go to what they meant by that when they drafted it and contrast it with the powers under the Trading with the Enemies Act, it's pretty clear that they don't mean tariff international trade. Like that's not something that they meant. And it wasn't meant to assign these broad sweeping powers. And there's a couple of other kind of judicial doctrines involved, like the major questions doctrine, that kind of gets into this. I don't want to get too weedsy on this, but essentially they've tried to adopt conservative judicial principles to attack the ability to allow the president to unilaterally ignore Congress and just do whatever he wants without specific delegation, the non-delegation argument. Congress hasn't specifically said he can do tariffs, so he's not allowed to use it to do tariffs. And the CIT in a per curiam decision, which means it was for the whole court, issued a decision that agreed with that argument, that it's actually well worth the read. There's a great footnote in there that even remarks that the trafficking tariffs, the fentanyl tariffs, are especially egregious because they don't change the effective rate of duty for smuggled drugs, because smuggled drugs are always going to pay zero duty because they are smuggled. It's got a little bit of sass to it, but very judicially restrained sass. It's very clear. They say that the IEPA tariffs in general aren't authorized. And in particular, they particularly call out the fentanyl tariffs, but not only not being authorized on the broad scale, but also suffering a subsidiary defect, which is the judges in the CIT basically covering themselves by saying, even if we're wrong, and even if this does have, he does have this, kingly power to just do tariffs or whatever, there's no rational connection between the tariffs and the emergency, because the tariffs have no impact on the emergency. Like, if he can call anything an emergency and trade imbalances are an emergency, then yes, tariffs do address that. And so that makes sense as a power. But if fentanyl is an emergency, tariffs on other products that will in no way touch smuggled fentanyl, that doesn't make sense. And so it just has to fall apart.
I mean, that's good news for Canada. I mean, a lot of the fentanyl tariffs have been suspended, or a lot of the tariffs on Canada more broadly have been suspended. This doesn't seem to apply to the steel tariffs and the auto stuff. So I don't know how much of a victory this really is for Canadian companies in general. I think this is much more a win for the Europeans and the Asian countries. Am I wrong about this?
No, I mean, yes and no. So, like you said, the aluminum tariffs, and I was slightly wrong, it's Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act in 1962.
You're just such a fraud, Rob. Like, I can't believe I'm even having you.
I know. 232, I can't believe it. But yeah, no, under 232, it's a national security tariff. It's a different matter. Those weren't being considered by the CIT in this case. So yeah, we're still hit by those. So keep in mind, the steel and aluminum tariffs don't just hit Canada; they hit globally. Here, Canada, we did have an exemption for CUSMA originating goods under the fentanyl tariffs. So in some ways, as I've said here and elsewhere, we were in something of a privileged position because we had a 10% tariff discount for CUSMA originating goods. The problem is CUSMA originating goods are
It's the USMCA, dude. It's the USMCA. I'm sorry, CUSMA makes no sense because the two letters of that are in the thing that are related to Canada are not together in CUSMA. It's the USMCA, the United States Mexico Canada trade agreement. It's
Well,
not CUSMA.
so that so the A in the CUSMA isn't part Canada, it's agreement. It's a Canada, US, Mexico agreement for CUSMA.
Jesus.
Um,
Okay, fine. Whatever.
which is actually closer to the convention is actually you're supposed to put the countries in alphabetical order. So in this case, it really shouldn't be, and this is I fought for this, I argued for this strenuously when they were negotiating. It should really be the Canada, Mexico, US agreement, which if you make Canada two letters, would make it the Camus agreement. And then it could be the most existential trade agreement we've ever seen.
You really have had that joke in your locker for far too long. I
I mean,
don't even get
I just
any
break it
laugh.
out every couple of years. I break that one out. It's so the CUSMA. I use CUSMA not just because it's the Canadian version, but just because it's easier to say. Acronyms are so much easier than initialisms. Um, but so you need a CUSMA originating good, and doing that requires you to actually prove that your goods meet the rules of origin. And some of them are easy. Like if you're harvesting wheat and pulling it out of the ground, then that's clearly originating. But the problem comes to things like if you have any kind of textile goods, if you have any kind of processed goods where you're using multiple different sources of input, and particularly if you're buying, say, from a domestic wholesaler and they can't prove the provenance of where their inputs come from, then those can cause problems. And so there's a reason why when the US announced that they were giving this exemption, they said only 38% of Canadian goods were CUSMA originating. And the reason for that is because for lots of other goods, they're what we call most favored nation or MFN free, which means if you're any country except for the only two countries that don't qualify are North Korea and Russia now, and I believe actually Belarus. If you're any other country, you come in at zero rate for a huge number of goods because the US long ago realized tariffs are dumb. They raise prices for consumers, they're economically inefficient. So let's get rid of them. Um, so for all those goods, it was so much easier if you're a Canadian manufacturer of widgets to just ship them into the US and claim MFN and not claim the preferential tariff treatment because then you didn't have to document your supply chain. You didn't have to produce certificates of origin. You didn't have to open yourself up to audit and verification. It was easy. The problem is when you do this, process, now you have a lot more friction. You have a lot more steps that need to be taken. And I mean, it's great for me. It's just fantastic for me as a trade lawyer because I get clients that call me. I have to go through the CUSMA rules of origin and we have to look at their supply chain and there's a lot more audits and the audits more intensive. And so that generates a lot of billings for me and that's great. But it's bad for manufacturers and it's bad for consumers on both sides of the border. So IEPA coming down in a lot of ways is good. The nightmare scenario for Canada is if on appeal, the appellate court says the judge was wrong in his sweeping judgment, the judges, sorry, were wrong in their sweeping judgment, in their decision that the IEPA tariffs on a whole are unconstitutional. But they were right on the fentanyl ones because the fentanyl have no rational connection to the emergency. So they're right on that. If they do that, then the fentanyl tariffs go away. But there's a provision in the reciprocal tariffs that say if the fentanyl tariffs go away, the reciprocal tariffs kick in. But the reciprocal tariffs have no carve out for USMCA or CUSMA originating goods. So then we would truly be in the same bucket as everyone else with the 10% tariff. Like being in the same bucket as everyone else with, no IEPA tariffs is fine. We're back in the situation we were in before this mess happened. Being in the 10% bucket with everyone else, we've lost a lot of preference that we're due under CUSMA.
Do you not think that if that were to be what happens, Trump would just back down, chicken out, to quote the lingo of the day? Don't you think he would just grant us the exception anyways, or us and the Mexicans?
I, I mean, I'm of two minds. I mean, this all goes back like there's spirals out from what's happened. And in terms of spiraling forward, we're going to see an appeal. There's no way that Trump's White House just accepts this ruling. They are 100% going to appeal this, and they're going to seek a stay. And I mean, they'll probably get the stay pending the decision. Um, and they're going to appeal it. I believe it goes first to the Federal Court of Appeal and then to SCOTUS, and they'll appeal it all the way up if needs be. Um, and if they win, we're back where we were, kind of ab initio. If they win on the broad power but lose on fentanyl, it's hard to predict the mind of Donald Trump, such as it is. Um, I think there's a reasonable argument to say he'll make the exemption because the reason why he made the exemption um, the was they were being browbeaten by business interests and lawmakers in the U.S. saying that you have to make this change, and that's not going to change if it's just the reciprocal tariffs. So I think you're probably right that if it is just reciprocal tariffs, we'll see that change, but it might take some time. And it's worth noting, like, for the 2 days between the fentanyl tariffs coming on and that CUSMA exception kicking in, Customs and Border Protection in the US has an FAQ on this. And they say very clearly they are not giving refunds for that time period because the exemption hadn't kicked in yet and the tariffs were validly authorized. So they refuse to give refunds. So if there is any time lag on giving a CUSMA exemption from the reciprocal tariffs in that situation, you're going to be out of luck for that time period. The real question will be what happens if, SCOTUS, so, if the liberals are joined by Amy Coney Barrett and maybe like Neil Gorsuch, as I said, because again, this argument is built to appeal to his kind of judicial
Well,
philosophy.
you got to think John Roberts, who is just the biggest corporate stooge on the court, will just side with corporate interest, and
Yeah.
corporate interest is in these tariffs going the fuck away.
So Roberts, one of Gorsuch and ABC and the liberal bloc
Yeah.
get together and kill this. The question then becomes, what does Trump do? And it's terrifying to me that there is a not insignificant chance that he calls the court traitors to the American people and says that he's ordering Customs and Border Protection to continue collecting tariffs.
Yeah. This is, I
And
mean,
then we're just in full-blown constitutional crisis of like we're back into who was it, like Andrew Jackson of they have their order, let them enforce it. Like, what do you do from there?
so the market futures are up as we're recording this. Am I crazy for thinking that that's like a slight overreaction? Because it seems like this is just going to cause more chaos, more confusion, and more uncertainty, all of which is pretty bad for the medium term health of the global economy.
I mean, I think you're probably right if things spiral out normally. I mean, maybe, just maybe. So I don't want to get too 4D chess in the market here, but maybe some of this
Yeah, we're
is
not.
also
Yeah,
being
we're also
driven.
not giving financial advice.
Yeah,
As much
yeah,
as we're not giving
definitely not
legal advice, we're
financial
also not
advice.
giving. We're also not giving financial advice.
Um, when it comes to this, not so much financial advice, but not to be too 4D chess, but if there's any possibility that you might have some individuals who are, buying into the futures market, especially if they're institutional, at a degree to try to signal to Trump that giving up on this is good for the market, and he likes to see the numbers go up. Like
And the
again, I
thing
know
is,
this
the
is the
thing is
sort
that
of argument.
if he was willing to be persuaded by this, don't you think he would have done this at like any of the market rallies when he canceled tariffs or delayed or whatever? Don't you think that would have like clued him in
I
before?
mean, that also assumes that he hasn't just been using the Friday, Monday cycle as market manipulation.
That is, I don't want to get sued,
Like,
so I'm gonna let
yeah,
that just sit here because yeah, no, I don't think there's
I,
anything I can say that doesn't get me in trouble.
you're going to Marino this. No, I mean, it's, conspiracy wackadoodle stuff, but at the same time,
This
like,
administration is
I can
pursuing
see
an economic policy that makes zero fucking sense. So at some point, rational
exactly,
explanations have to exit this conversation.
exactly. Like, and to a degree, I could see again certain pot committed billionaires who have a vested interest in these sorts of things, trying to pull what levers they can. And I mean, to be fair, people are going to make a chunk of money because markets are going to go up on this almost certainly because it does. If you believe that the court is going to take this power away, and if you believe that Trump is not going to, cause a constitutional crisis by undermining and essentially telling the Supreme Court to sit and swivel, then you got to think that if what's causing market downturns is fear of chaos by giving Trump the keys to do whatever he wants on tariffs whenever he wants, and the courts have just taken that away, that then is good for the markets generally.
Look, if SCOTUS just basically allows this CIT opinion or writes an opinion extremely similar to it, a 2000, a 2000 plus Dow day makes complete sense. I just
Yeah.
feel I just feel like there's a reason to not have that day until it happens. Um, do you have any more trade law thoughts, or do you want to fight me about King Charles now?
I suppose the one other trade law thought is uh or two other trade law thoughts. One is going to be what is Canada's reaction going to be in terms of the surtax? Because the surtax is continuing to be collected. We do have the remission, and I I would like Oxford Economics to post their study publicly, together with all the supporting evidence, claiming that the remission went away entirely, because I don't see that. I don't see a reasonable interpretation that
This
gets you
is
to that, and I'd
Yeah, yeah.
love to be able to see that.
This is your contempt of the headline that came out a couple weeks ago in the National Post.
Yeah, no, if you go to the trade law guy, you can see my very thorough thread deconstructing this. Um,
But Warren
but
Kinsella told you you're wrong, so you're wrong.
I mean, Warren Kinsella telling me I'm wrong is one of the greatest signs that I'm right. Um,
You might say
when
that,
it,
and possibly comment.
um, when it comes to the surtax, like we have this remission, and we actually do have a customs notice. And if I can do a plug, at McCarthy's, we have a trade blog, Terms of Trade, where we have an article on this specifically, which is a customs notice that significantly constrains or purports to constrain the scope of the remission order. Um, it's not all that broad. It has very significant caveats. So the surtax is still being collected on a range of goods. What's going to be interesting to see is if there is any movement from the Canadian side to suspend, not withdraw, but say suspend the surtax so long as the IEEPA tariffs remain inoperative. The steel and aluminum surtax retaliation would stay in place, but the remainder, whether or not that goes, and I suppose that gets into, are you looking towards, attacking the intent of Trump, which might speak to keeping the surtax in place? Or are you looking towards attacking like the actual impact, which might speak to suspending it? It's actually going to be an interesting question for the Carney PMO and the finance team as to how they want to handle that. So that's the one interesting question on the Canadian side. The interesting question on the American side is if these laws are unconstitutional, U.S. laws, and then I would only assume to avoid ab initio, do you go back and if you're one of the importers that's paid tariffs under IEPA, do you go back and seek refunds? I talked earlier about how CBP was saying for that like 2 day period, you can't get refunds because the tariffs were valid legislation that was validly enacted or a valid executive order. But if it's not a valid executive order, do you go back and seek refunds? And that might be something that people, importers should probably talk about with their trade counsel and customs brokers about.
For sure. King Charles, please explain why my crash out about the fact that we had to call in King Charles to act as a pinch hitter because we are a fake country that doesn't we are a fake country that doesn't really exist was over the top.
All right. So this has a couple of layers to it. And there's a couple of different arguments that can address different people with different mindsets. The first one is the one I know you're not going to like, but it's that he's not actually a foreign king. And this gets back to the fact that he is the king of Canada, just as much as he's the king of the United Kingdom. And I say United Kingdom, people say king of England, including, I'm sure friend of the pod, JJ McCullough, who is obsessed with talking about him as the king of England. That is actually not one of his regnal titles. He is not the king of England.
King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Correct.
Counterpoint. He has never lived in this fucking country. Do we think? Okay, here's my thing. Do we think? So remember the Mike Myers ad where Cardi kept doing the like sort of essentially like finish the line or whatever.
Yeah.
How many of those do we think Charles could get right?
Oh no, so like probably not. Like
has Charles ever heard? Does Charles know who Gord Downie is?
He might actually. Like
could Charles finish the lyrics to any Blue Rodeo song?
I mean, probably not. Like again, so
okay,
here's the thing.
Then you're not the king. Then you're not a Canadian king. You might be the king of Canada. You're not a Canadian.
So this is the thing. He's from the position of the foreign king argument. He is the king of Canada. He's the only king of Canada we got. We don't have another king of Canada. I don't know if you've checked your pantry and somewhere behind the maple syrup and the oatmeal, there's a king of Canada shelf that you can just take one down and pop them out. That doesn't happen. We have one king. That is the king we have. That is the sovereign. And it is an entirely valid exercise to ask the sovereign to fulfill their duties. And this is where I think, as I have said previously, I think the follow-up thread, the in the sober light of day thread that you went into explaining your position, the best argument there, and the argument I find most agreeable, is that if anything, we as a country have been derelict in not holding our monarchy accountable to be sufficiently tied to our country. Like that is an argument that I think has legs. It is actually important. And I'm sure there are many good reasons. I mean, throughout the 90s, I could definitely say, the Chrétien government probably wouldn't want Queen Elizabeth coming to open parliament because of the issues with separatism in Quebec and the potential inflammatory impact of a visit. Like, I can understand the arguments of why various governments throughout the years have said, I don't really want to do this because of the history and the separatism issues that arise. But I actually think that there is, and I can also understand going back further why it might be difficult in a world where air travel was less convenient, it was less speedy, virtual presence was something that wasn't even a concept. Why there might be increasing separation between the Dominion and the Crown. Like, I can understand why that built up, and then you get a sense of inertia. But he is the sovereign at the moment. And so I think that there is some duty upon us as a country to try to work in that relationship and to try to say, look, we want you to be the sovereign of Canada, but that means you got to come over more than once, every, decade. Like, we need to see the royal family, and not just, the king and queen, but, we need to see, maybe some, senior royals come and do a tour. Maybe Will and Kate come to Canada once every couple of years. As they grow older, maybe their kids start to visit even before they're the Prince of Wales or the Duchess of Cambridge or wherever they'll be dukes and duchesses of, to help foster a greater sense of connection between the crown and the country. Because I think that that is important because they are fundamentally our monarch. And so if you're going to have someone do this, they're who you have. So that's the first kind of bucket, which is that they are the monarch of Canada, and that is what it is. The second bucket here is the bucket of the toolkit, the weaponry. It's an argument kind of saying, if I am if we go back to the Second World War, when a British pilot used bullets that were packed in the Pickering Defense Industries Limited plant to shoot down a Nazi Messerschmitt or Fokker. Was that subservience to Canada by using the tool made by Canadian hands, packed by Canadian hands, and sent over there to do a job? No, it wasn't. It was using a tool to accomplish a goal in a war. Canada is in a period of crisis, especially when the throne speech was called and when it was given. And Carney, I think, just like any prime minister, has to use whatever weapons he has to try to win that war and diffuse the threat to Canada. And we know Donald Trump is particularly enamored of the UK. And we know that Keir Starmer has been trying to use that and throw Canada under the bus. And I have very few nice things to say about Keir Starmer present. And to counteract that, I think I remember back when Keir Starmer first did that second royal visit and then had the audacity to say, well, I didn't invite him, the king did. It's like, no, you numbskull. He can only do what you tell him to do because you are government. Like, that's how responsible government works. Like, you are a lawyer, you know better.
I don't know if I've seen interviewers because he make that argument on. Oh, I don't remember. It's it don't remember any of these people's names. But it was the podcast that used to be the BBC. Fuck, Emily Maitlis and Co.
Yeah.
This is really offensive. John Sopel, and I don't remember what the other guy's name is. I don't think I've seen interviewers more befuddled. Like, I don't know if I've seen interviewers more shocked by a politician saying just batshit crazy stuff than Keir Starmer being like, "Hey man, the king decided to fucking invite him."
Yeah, it was like that's the thing.
Baffled.
Like, they're like, so you're saying responsible government is no longer a thing? Is that what you're telling us? So I was incredibly mad at him, and I was mad. So that's why I was pissed at the then Trudeau government, because Starmer did this invite, and then there wasn't anything initially, and it's his job to give advice to the king to do something. And we actually saw some of that then a little bit later when it was like on a UK naval exercise. King Charles was wearing like his Canadian uniform with his Canadian decorations, was just sending that kind of subtle signal. But I think that this was a much more overt signal, and it did two things as a tool, as a weapon, which is number one, it appeals to Trump because Trump has a fascination and a love for the royals. So that's on the one hand, which is why Starmer used the royal invitation. And number two is it helped throw chaff around that. Like previously, it was saying, well, the royals and this whole apparatus is in the Commonwealth isn't really with Canada. We're not standing with Canada. We're not, making that statement. But now all of a sudden, you had the king coming out and making statements about Canadian sovereignty and being very clear that he has a dear place in his heart for Canada. And that throws chaff around Starmer's photo op, which beyond being good for Canada, lets me feel good about someone throwing sand in, Starmer's gears.
I mean, look, this is a fuck your Starmer podcast. Like, let's not pretend otherwise. It is a foreign king. Like, I know I keep coming back to it. It is a foreign king. I don't care. The argument that like it's the tool in the toolbox, that's fine. Here's my actual position. Harry should have picked one of Canada and Australia to live in. And I'm talking like 20 years ago. He should have picked one. Okay. Because the problem is that we have these people who are very obviously going crazy, right? Being the spare makes you fucked in the head, right? Harry has had his very well documented struggles. And frankly, it doesn't seem like he's significantly better in the whole like mental sanity, mental health space these days. I haven't read his book, but that was certainly the takeaway from people who did. If he could have just been the King of Canada, right? Like, wouldn't that have been a better you or the King of Australia? You could have picked Australia if you wanted, but like, wouldn't that have been a better thing for both the Canadian crown or the Australian crown, whichever he picked? Like, if you're Charlotte or Louis, I don't remember Will's kids' names. I think those are the two spares. Wouldn't it be like, shouldn't they just pick one each and like go to school there, like actually get acclimated there, like truly, and then they could become the king and the king or queen of Canada? Like, wouldn't that be a better thing for the institution of the crown? Given that I think both of us are, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I am a monarchist solely because fuck the concept of opening the Constitution to create a republic, right?
So I'm a monarchist that's more dedicated in that. Like, I actually believe in the monarchy as an institution for two reasons. Number one, because it appeals to the historical kind of traditionalist in me on that front. But number
Is
two,
number two because you're the
because
waspiest human being alive?
no, it's a political point. It's the one of the great things about having a head of state that is a hereditary constitutional monarchy is that they have no legitimacy. There's unlike say an elected presidency where whoever is elected can always try to claim that they have the mandate of the will of the people or something else and potentially cause problems. No one's following Charles in a coup. Like, that's never going to happen.
Just do the German thing where they have a president and nobody knows who the fuck it is.
Maybe, but even then, so that then ties back to the fact that I do think that there is value and symbolic value in a royal family, and I do think that
Wasp.
yeah. No, that's fine. Though I will know I'm not the waspiest person ever because I go by my first name Robert. I don't do R. Andrew Glasgow. That's not a thing I do. Um, but when it comes to this, like again, I do agree with you fundamentally on the the split family. Like I think we probably all would have been better off if at some point someone like, again, Harry had, as you said, like 20 years ago, maybe coming off of his stint in the army, settles down in Canada and raises a family here, maybe goes to, graduate school, finds a wife, raises a family, lives a Canadian life, kind of fully integrates into Canadian culture and starts, like a separate branch of, Windsor Mountbatten or Saxe Coburg Gotha or however far back you want to go, um, in Canada. And that becomes a Canadian monarchy. Like I think it would probably be great if you had. I think I put on Twitter Princess Charlotte. One of her names is Elizabeth. And for those who aren't monarchists, as I am, when the king or queen becomes monarch, they're allowed to choose any of their names as their regnal name. Uh, Prince Charles chose to keep Charles as Charles III, which is a choice, given the history of Charles, as a regnal name. Um, but he could have gone with King Arthur because Arthur is one of his names. Prince William, one of his names is Arthur, so he could do that as well. I say apropos nothing. But Charlotte, one of her names is Elizabeth, so she could potentially be Queen Elizabeth the First of Canada. Though I suppose actually no, she'd be Queen Elizabeth the Third because I think we did import the British. It's complicated, but it could be the first, proper House of Canada. If you were to establish this with her, it could be a queen, it could be an Elizabeth, and that would actually be really poetic in a lot of ways. So I actually think there is a lot to say to that. Now that would require a certain level of
Forward thinking that I don't think this royal family has proven the capacity to have.
so forward thinking that I don't think this family has capacity to have. Curiously enough, if anyone were to have the capacity to have it, and if anyone were to have the gumption to try to push it, it would probably be Charles. Like this is the thing about King Charles. Like if you go back, in some ways he's very traditionalist and conservative in like a very traditional conservative sense in terms of liking small town parochial life. Like, he set up that whole like traditional village in the UK as one of his kind of charitable endeavors. But in a lot of ways, he's been very much pro multiculturalism, pro ecumenicalism. He's been very much reaching out to other faiths. He's like, I don't think it's any accident that he was, able and willing and seemed enthusiastic around the land acknowledgement that he gave as part of the throne speech. It's something that we've seen historically from him, going back as far as when he was the Duke of Wales. He was one of the first Dukes of Wales in a good long time to actually learn Welsh and not just phonetically read out a speech that was given to him. It's he might be someone that does it, but then again, he has cancer, and if he kicks the bucket, and Prince William has been very much, I don't want to be in the public eye. I don't want my family to be, public. And I mean, that's a whole other issue of that's, kind of, that's the job. Like that's what you're being paid for. I'm not sure he would have the gumption to say, I'm going to send, one of my kids to go, a university to Canada to then just live there and take this role over there. I'm not sure he would do that.
Yeah, but the thing about Charles is that he wants a slimmer royal family, and at some point it's like, so what are they gonna do if if the sort of like Princess Anne model of I'm gonna be the working royal who just does the most engagements and I just show up everywhere and I cut every ribbon and I go to every hospital in England, right? If that's not really going to be available, I don't know. I have like a lot of feelings about the royal family. The funny thing is, Harry is the one who should be the king. In terms of personality, in terms of all of it, he's the one who should be king. Like, unfortunately, the UK, Charles and Diana, got deeply unlucky because Will is suited to be the spare. Harry should be
Yeah.
the king. Like they should retroactively flip it just to fix it. Also because it would be really hilarious if Meghan Markle somehow became Queen of England. Can Harry
I mean,
like?
that would.
Well, no, because he's already no, because they just put one of the kids in. If Harry like, or if Will just like went full abdication crisis, they wouldn't give it to they wouldn't give it to Harry. They just put the oldest kid in with like a protectorship or whatever the fuck it's called.
Regency. Yes.
Oh, I have one very important legal question, and then we'll do like 10 minutes of election takes and then a Sorkin thing at the end. Okay.
All right.
Yes. Okay, so let's say Charles had stayed in Canada, right? He's now left, whatever. Let's say he did like a 10-day royal tour, right? Tack that on to the end of his working obligations, right?
Yeah.
And let's say it's like next Thursday or whatever, and the House finally votes on the throne speech. And they voted down, which in reality they're not going to do. But let's just say for this hypothetical. But Charles is still in the country, and he's still acting as King of Canada in his capacity over here, right? Who does Mark Carney ask for a dissolution of Parliament? Or to tender his
Hmm.
resignation to? Who? Charles or Mary Simon?
I mean, like, if that were to happen purely because of history, if I'm McCartney, I go to the king. I'm like, fuck it, let's just go.
I mean, I feel like the actual answer is they would both be in the room because what you would
Yeah.
not want is a situation where Charles makes the call, they leave, and that's like, oh no, but Mary Simons didn't make it, so like we now have this like legal quagmire. The answer is they would both do it, and there would probably be a joint thing. But like, is there an answer to who legally would have that
I
power if
mean,
Charles is here?
there probably is, and I for certain don't know it. Um, so I probably go to like Philip de Casse or someone to be like, hey, so what's up with this?
I'm just saying that would have been a really like I would love that to happen just like one time,
Well,
just for
I
the fun of
guess. I mean, maybe it will happen more often if we, get one of Will's kids over here as the new monarch of Canada.
that would be delightful. We have plenty of good universities. Um, did you have any like broader election thoughts? You have not been on since then. Obviously, I've written a ton about it. Um, anything shock you? Anything surprise you? Anything make you particularly upset or anything make you particularly upset or particularly overjoyed?
I mean, I'm happy that the Liberals won. Uh, I know there are some people who are very cut up about it not being a majority, but I keep coming back to if you take us back to any time up to and including like Mark Carney winning that leadership race and said this is what the result was going to be, we would be ecstatically overjoyed. Like I go back to that pod that you recorded with I think Brian, where he said, "Oh, I think Mark Carney could have a ceiling of something like 100 seats," and you were like, "Oh, come on, that's not possible. That can't happen."
Yeah, no, yeah. My reaction.
And
sitting in the exact place I was when I recorded that with Brian. My reaction was I was going to say 80. I was expecting him to say 60, and I was expecting him to call me a liberal hack when I argued for 80. And then he said 100, and I'm like, oh, that's even aggressive for my liking.
yeah, and so like this is the thing. I think like
And
the place we're
we recorded
in,
that like second week of January, I think.
yeah,
Oh my god.
and that's how things change. Like people who are like, "Oh, but we didn't get a majority." It's like, dude, like not only did you win an election that by any sane and objective measure, like going into it, like if you just to lay out the fundamentals as they existed in like December, January of that year, they would say, so you're winning like 60 seats, like maybe less. and you win the election, you win the plurality of seats, you are clearly the only party that can form government. And not only that, but you've won more seats than you had under the horrifically unpopular government that came immediately before, that lasted for, like 4 years. What are you complaining about? Like, you have a functional majority. Now, I know it would have been great to have held on to Terra Nova, and it would have been great to flip Windsor to Kamsa and to try to get that majority and to entice one of the conservatives to keep their hat in the ring for the speakership, or to give it to May or something, to get like an actual majority. But functionally, like the NDP, especially as a non-official party, are like, I know we always say the NDP is bankrupt, but especially because they didn't get a lot of riding reimbursements because they didn't hit 10% in a lot of places. They're completely out of money. I think you previously said,
I want to pick up on this specifically. The NDP
yeah,
didn't get the riding, aren't going to get a significant amount of their deposits back. One, or their reimbursement. Sorry, the British thing is the deposits. Two, they're going to have to use party money to run like a research bureau, right? To like run a legislative staff. Three, they have to run a leadership race, which, I mean, if they do it right, could be an opportunity to make a little bit of money for them, but like, I doubt it. And four, like, they clearly don't even know what they're doing with the resources they had, given all the stories that have come out this week about, them trying to save Jagmeet. So,
yeah, no,
they're
it's
completely fucked. And the thing is, but they could vote. No, they can't. Leverage, your only leverage is in the actual willingness to pull the trigger, right? Whether it's pulling the trigger on a parliament, literally pulling the trigger on a gun in a crime, or, to use any sports analogy, right? Let's say Joe Burrow held out, right? Or Josh Allen or any Patrick Mahomes just said, you're redoing my deal. Versus if, what quarterback do I want to slander right now? Genuine question. Who is the starting quarterback in Pittsburgh right now?
oh God.
I
Because I got
Wilson. I
Wilson.
think we're all assuming it's going to be Rodgers, but like this is my point. Kyler Murray, screw it, right? If Kyler Murray does it, here's the thing. If you're Mahomes, you win that negotiation. You know why? Because the Chiefs don't have any leverage. Because the Chiefs are not actually going to let you rock up to week one with it unsigned, right? The Bengals are not going to let Joe Burrow rock up to week one unsigned. The Bills would never let Josh Allen rock up to week one side. And the Cardinals, if you're asking for $70 million, yeah, they probably would.
Right? Mason Rudolph, by the way.
Sure, right. But like, Dak's probably too good. I almost made a Dak joke, but like he is probably too good for the point I'm making. But like, this is the point. Like, that sort of like your leverage depends on how credible the threat is. And the NDP don't have a credible threat of going to an election. It's, by the way, why I was so right about them never calling an election all throughout 2023 when there were all these stories about it. Every time it's like, you people don't understand leverage. You just don't.
Yeah, no, it's like they can't do it as we've discussed previously. The Bloc probably can't do it for the next 2 years.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing that nobody in English Canada understands. But like the separatists, the broad separatist movement, they all have to decamp to the PQ right now. Like all of the staffers, all of the organization, they've all got to get that party back into shape because the PQ is polling great right now, but institutionally that party got rotted out by years of neglect and decay, and they've got to rebuild that fucking thing on the fly. They can't afford another federal election, and especially given the donor bases of the PQ and the BQ tend to be very similar, they can't afford another election federally until the other side of that election. Party's got a lot of runway here. And the other thing, and the point I've made before, I kind of think this was a good election to win from an economic standpoint because one, there's a lot of Trudeau stuff that's like a lot of low hanging fruit that they can fix, right? The immigration cuts are going to continue to flow through, which will decrease housing prices and will sort of fix the youth unemployment problem that we have now. Carney's already talking about undoing some of the Trudeau era crime reforms, progressive crime reforms. Um, feels like there's a lot of low hanging fruit liberals can solve, which will get them back to a sort of plausible state, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah. No, no, I would largely agree with you. I've always said on
Oh, plus the Thorne
some,
Fraser and Naderskin Smith housing reforms are going to flow into consequence of that,
yeah.
plus the DC's cuts and everything they're going to do. Um, we're not talking about Gregor Robertson because like I just can't. But like all that stuff's going to flow through to is going to flow
Yeah,
in.
no,
It's
no.
probably going to be a pretty good, economic tailwind. Even without the Trump tailwind, I feel like the government's probably going to have a decent economic tailwind behind them at the next election.
No, no, I definitely think there's going to be that, and especially because, as I've said before, if you look at the way that our GDP per capita contracted and how it couples with the immigration data on temporary foreign workers and international students, if you cut those numbers, you're going to start seeing, an artificial goosing of the GDP per capita figure in the same way we've seen an artificial suppression. Because I think a lot of people looking for the simplistic analysis have said, well, we've had a decade of stagnation because the GDP per capita came back down and didn't move at the end. And that shows that the average Canadian's quality of life didn't change. I think that that's wrong. Like, I think that if you subdivide it to only look at like permanent residents and citizens, that, per capita figure is actually probably going up. Like, there's probably a substantive increase in the quality of life. But what we've seen is that the very low quality of life of temporary foreign workers and international students has effectively subsidized the GDP and pushed the GDP, but dragged down the GDP per capita. I'm not saying that's a good thing. What I'm saying, in fact, it's worse. It's that it's like Dubai with a smile. It's Qatar with a smile. It's creating prosperity on the backs of the suffering of an imported class of guest workers, and that's bad. And that's something that Carney is just going to benefit from just by continuing this. And just touching on one other thing, the other element of Quebec, in addition to the fact that all of the separatists are going to have to decamp, is Carney is probably also going to have at least some interest in playing nice, at least in certain ways, partly because at least again as an Anglo rest of Canada, or I don't want to get too sidetracked because I know there's whole pods to be done on Quebec. But my understanding is with Pablo Rodriguez in the leadership that now becomes a very tightly contested race in Quebec for the Quebec Liberal Party.
I mean, with him there, it becomes an absolute fucking. I mean, it's already going to be a shit show to model. I've built version 1.0, but I'm waiting to publish it of my Quebec model. But yeah, no, that thing is going to be spicier than a. Oh boy, that race with Pablo gets real fucking interesting. Um, the other thing, of course, is that Cardi's French probably won't be as bad next time.
Well, yes, he's going to be running out every Quebec minister to do policy and to speak to the Quebec media. Like I said, I think that my election take is I think that this is a good election to win. I think the biggest headwind you were facing was the Trump chaos, especially if the court decision comes out in our favor, then not only now do you not have as much of that chaos, but you get to cloak yourself in the laurels of having won the trade war, which gives you extra credit. And I I think that can really propel things forward. And like we've said, it's a functional majority. So he'll be able to pass nearly anything he wants to pass.
And even
And
where
I
the
think,
NDP and even where the NDP pull a stink, I'm sorry if Carney wants to reimpose mandatory minimums or pass an income tax cut, please God, Pierre Polyev, vote against it. Oh my God, make you look like an absolute piece of shit.
yeah. And I think the last element is the one of the big things holding the liberals back at a certain point last year, as we said time and time again, is regardless of how you feel about the speaker's ruling, just ignoring the speaker's ruling and showing contempt for parliament was absolutely, hamstringing and destroying the ability of the government to govern and completely deadlocking the House.
Yeah,
And I can see Carney both in temperament and in desire to move on. If I can't remember if it was Coyne or someone else ran an article about what will he do if the conservatives bring this back. I could see him just saying, "Okay, fine, clerk here, go deal with it. I'm done,"
yeah.
and washing his hands of it. Like I can see his attitude is something very much in line with my own on a lot of these, which is I just want to get this done. Like there are things I need to get done that I think this country needs, and I'm not going to allow some squeamishness about whether or not procedure was entirely proper dictate what I'm going to do.
I will also say this PMO and the sort of central brain trust around Carney seems to bail out of bad decisions faster than the Trudeau one did.
Yeah.
Um, can I say this on the podcast? Yeah, fuck it. There was some talk of like, not letting cabinet ministers do press the day of the cabinet swearing in. Well, then two ministers did PNP, right?
Yeah.
Party finally did PNP this week, which was very good. Um, they eventually got there on Paul Chang, right? They seem to not be willing to stick their heads up their asses quite as much as the Trudeau PMO in the dying days. If you would like to attribute some or all of that to Mr. Uh, Jerry Butts, he will probably yell at me if he listens to this podcast. If you do, Jerry, hello. If not, it's fine. But I just think the team in general, Tom Pitfield, Brendan Cayley, I can't believe I'm about to say something nice about the guy, but Marco Mendocino, like they just seem less willing to defend indefensible positions indefinitely, which is a necessary thing if you want to be good at quite literally anything, but especially being, the prime minister of a country.
Well, yeah, and they're also willing to have conversations with ministers and to get them on message. I mean, we saw that with
Stephen
the
Guilbeault shut
question.
the fuck up today. Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, well, when asked about pipelines, say, well, that's not really my mandate, and moving on like that. Compare that to his first answer. I can't, given his history, I can't imagine that was caused by purely self-reflection and analysis. Uh, I imagine someone had a quiet word with him over a cup of tea.
Or probably a not so quiet word. Okay, so I am a so that's the analysis for part. You're one of the few people who has watched the West Wing with the level of attention that I have. So I have a question. I have a premise for you, okay? What
Okay.
is the Mount Rushmore of stupidest, worst Aaron Sorkin writing? So, and for the sake of it, I am excluding Sports Night because Sports Night is a gem and everything in Sports Night is perfect. And I'm excluding Studio 60 because I've never seen it. And the movies don't count because fuck the movies. They're not continuity. This is a newsroom and West Wing slander segment. You have not seen the newsroom.
So I
But
haven't seen much of it,
there is one thing in
but
the newsroom that is really, really stupid. That makes no sense. And Aaron Sorkin is bad for this. But here's my Mount Rushmore, and I want you to tell me if I'm missing anything, okay?
eh,
So, number one, uh, the fact that they have the arguably the greatest scene in the Western, right? The Mark Harmon dies, robbery, sent
Yeah,
to Hallelujah in New York, for the Catholic Charities fundraiser, right?
yeah.
They do not bring this up at any point in the fourth season.
No,
It
it
does not
completely
happen. It
abandons.
completely went away. CJ was clearly smitten for him. Just doesn't, nothing happens. He's not brought up ever again. It is the best run of episodes is that like last 4 episode run. The scene with Fitz and Leo in the Situation Room, all of the CG of it all, incredible work. And then they just fucking toss all of that away. Absolutely fucking insane. That's number one. Number two, the campaign finance thing at the end of season one, where Bartlett gets a deal with this like, hillbilly redneck Republican senator by just being like, well, what do I get in return? And he goes, the praise of a grateful president. That's a good answer. And then, so they allegedly solve campaign finance. But then, when Bruno Gianelli shows back up 2 seasons later, or season and a half later, apparently they didn't. Apparently, the whole thing that we spent all of that time fixing didn't get fixed, and they don't explain why.
So
Three,
that's two.
do you disagree? Do you want to defend either of these
No,
terrible
no, no,
decisions?
no, no, no. I'm not defending either of those. I do have a comment about one, but I want to see if you hit this comment later down. But I think it ties into it like a meta comment. So let's go to number three.
Three is the fact that it's never actually explained why they have to make Bartlett come out with his MS, right? Because it's like, well, Hoynes does the thing, and it's like, oh, he thinks he's running or whatever. But it's like, okay, so they tell Toby. They could have just like, I don't understand. They never at any point explain adequately why they couldn't just tell Hoynes to go fuck himself and just put it like there's no actual reason why it had to spread. They're just like, well, the obvious answer is they wanted that to be the plot of season three, or at least the first half of season three. But like, there's no actual reason why Toby figuring it out meant that the entire country had to find out. None whatsoever. But they wanted Bartlett to yell in Latin in a church that's supposed to look like the National Cathedral.
Okay, so on this one, I will say two things. Number one, that scene in and of itself excuses everything that comes before. Like that scene, like it is almost the opposite problem with number one. Like one of the things that makes number one so bad is you have this like the thing that Sorkin is great at, which is this great set piece where all the music, the acting, the gravitas, the writing, everything just clicks together in a way that works, and then he immediately ignores it and wastes it. Here, there's some wastage and there's some kind of bullshit, but then it leads into this fantastic scene that then is kind of foundational in the way it sets up. And I think I'm willing to live with the kind of suspension of disbelief. Like maybe like I seem to recall at least part of it is also how righteously indignant Toby is and whether or not Toby will agree to just keeping everything secret from the American people if Bartlett runs again. Like, do you think Toby, knowing Toby's like personality, like he has loyalty, but Toby, like, you and I have sometimes talked about Sam Seaborn as being the kind of doughy eyed, naive idealist. And Toby has a lot of the hardcore, sarcastic, pragmatic, cynical warrior. But at his core, Toby has this deep, abiding belief in the American system that's every bit as strong as Sam's. It's just tempered in most cases by his cynicism. And that's really, revisited and seen in the Christmas special. That's his, Emmy Award winning Christmas special, where it's, when he's being, said, well, if we give this guy, this homeless, veteran an Arlington funeral, won't we have to give it to everyone? It's like, well, we should. Like, that's what we should be doing. Like, he has that. And so I wonder if Bartlett was like, nah, we're just going to keep it on the DL and I'm just going to run again. If Toby would be like, okay, that sounds good. Sounds good, boss. I
Okay,
just,
fair, but
I'm
then
not like,
fair. Then have that fight.
no,
You
yeah,
know
no, I
that.
agree with you. Have that fight. Have that fight. Like make that more explicit and play that up. Like I agree with you on that. But I don't think it's bad writing, but I don't think like it's at the same level as like the first two items on the list.
Okay. So here's the fourth one. It's the only newsroom thing in here, mostly because like the newsroom is way worse than the West Wing, but like it's just like a steady drumbeat of bad as opposed to like spike bad. But here's the thing, okay? So in the Osama bin Laden is killed episode, it is canon that Joe Biden tells Jeff Daniels, gives him confirmation that they killed bin Laden. Okay. The
Mhm.
next season, uh the next season they accuse Obama and Biden of dropping chemical weapons on a town in Pakistan. Okay. Why did Jeff Daniels not just fucking talk to Joe Biden? They used to play in a softball league together in the canon of this show. Why the fuck didn't they just have a conversation? Did they forget? Did they forget? I feel like that's a conversation that would be had. If he just unsolicitedly
It does
emails
seem.
you about Osama bin Laden, I feel like you would. I feel like that would be a phone call.
Like, it would be like I assume.
How is Aaron Sorkin this bad at this? Like, how is he this bad at this? Also,
I
and the same thing. The way they get away with it is the producer cuts rejigs the interview to do it, but he gets caught because there was college basketball playing in the background, and the shot clock jumps when he says it, and it was clearly a splice. Are you telling me again? You are accusing the White House of war crimes, and you're telling me nobody found the unrendered cut? That the EP or a network lawyer is not demanding the uncut footage. How is he this bad at the? Oh, I hate Aaron Sorkin so much.
so here's my thing. On the newsroom, I didn't watch it as much. I would note I find it funny when they do that speech at the beginning in the first episode, which I did watch, and they talk about how terrible America actually is, and they bring up 178th in child mortality without understanding that that means they're like the 178th in terms of most children dying. So that's actually like a good thing.
That's like
Um,
21st or something, 25th,
yeah, like
depending on
yeah,
how many
more or less,
countries
and
we're
like
counting.
yeah, it varies. Like it's still not, perfect, though. Again, as some people would argue back at the time, part of this also counts how you count stillbirths, in terms of child mortality, and different countries have different methodologies, and so you can't just do a straight, number comparison. Um, but so my bigger problem with Sorkin, and this ties into, some of what you said, some of what we haven't. And it kind of ties to start with that first step on the Mount Rushmore in terms of the waste of NCIS dude's death and CJ's characterization. Uh, it's the same problem as from like the one season newsroom I watched. And I know how you feel about Sports Center, but the same problem there, which is Aaron Sorkin has at best an incredibly limited ability to write female characters. And
Honestly,
the
stunned I
only time,
forgot to mention that myself because yes, that is
yeah.
horrible.
And that's at like that's like at the heart of actually problem one, which is to build off of that. Like, and we saw him build off of that in other characters where, like you had the entire arc of Josh Lyman with PTSD being shot and that carryover and the impact that has. You have that, but you don't have the same development for CJ. Part of that's because Aaron Sorkin either can't or doesn't want to write that. And he doesn't want to have that development and have those internal struggles and those internal thoughts. And I think that that's part of the problem. You get the same thing in the newsroom, and to a lesser degree, Sports Center, but it's like, oh, you have this. He just thinks, I guess, that if you say that a woman is strong and accomplished and everyone respects her, then if she behaves like a lovesick schoolgirl that's fumbling and incompetent because of that, it doesn't matter because everyone all still acknowledges that they're this hard bitten, strong reportage type. And in this kind of, it's not even, show don't tell, but it's also like the showing you're doing is directly contradicting the telling. And it's really creating a dissonance. And that's really in my mind like at the top, and then that's like the meta error that then carries over and starts infecting some of these anyway. So that's my Sorkin problem.
So in the third season of the newsroom, it starts with the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yeah,
And so they send Maggie, who in the entirety of season two was or in by the end of season two was traumatized was an alcoholic who was traumatized by having a kid killed in her arms in Africa, reporting a story. Apparently, she's then good enough to be the only producer on the ground with the number two talent at the network in Boston for like 4 days consecutively. Why, I have no fucking idea. Um, but so he, for some reason, eats a walnut salad, even though he's allergic to walnuts. So she has to go on the air. Okay, they've got about 40 seconds for her to be there. Okay, so Mac is talking to her in her ear, prepping her for this hit. Okay, would you like
yeah.
to know what Mackenzie, this again allegedly extremely successful, extremely put together woman does? What she uses this very valuable time to tell her correspondent, who is about to make her on air debut.
A super high tension environment.
Yeah. Not anything to do with how to do a TV hit well, not anything about details or specifics. What to do if Mac's dress that Maggie is wearing gets stained.
Yeah.
The fuck are we doing here?
Man,
The fuck are we doing here? Like, I mean, it's oh god, Sorkin's so aggravating. My real problem, my like real problem with Sorkin is just like it's all about fathers and sons, right?
yeah.
Except for the fact that they just like completely abandoned the fact that it's all about fathers and sons. They just completely forgot about it after like season two, right? Like, I mean, they kind of vaguely bring it back when Sorkin when Sorkin is leaving the show when the whole like Zoe gets kidnapped thing, but like, you know, so much of that, so much of the West Wing's like great dynamic, you know, was the Leo and Josh relationship, right? And it they just become chief of staff and deputy, right? Like at the end, when Sorkin's gone, they sort of in season six, when Leo is back from the heart surgery, they kind of bring it back, but it's like and then hell, when Toby calls Bartlett out in the Oval after Iowa, right? Like,
Yeah.
the two Bartletts again, that never resolves, right? what happens with that conversation? It's great TV, right? And then they have Bartlett get therapy, right? And you have Toby screaming at Andy because both of them are clearly fucked by it because they haven't spoken in like 5 days, right? But how does that resolve? They don't do anything with it, right? It oh my god, it aggravates me because the thing about Sorkin is that if he just trusted a single other human being to give him an edit, he'd be the greatest. He'd be the greatest mind in TV and film, right? But he just and when he has one, it produces the Social Network, right? When he has to justify his decisions to Fincher, it's arguably the greatest movie of the 21st century. Anyways, I wanted to
It's
rant about this on a podcast, and you are the only regular guest in my rotation that I could have this fight with. So not fight, but I could argue. I could
oh,
with this.
but no, I appreciate it. I mean, again, like I entirely agree. It's a thing you often see with artistic types is they work best with someone that they know and trust to pull them back and to keep them focused and to keep everything tight.
It's
And
why basically every great musician solo career is worse than their band.
exactly. And it just works. And the ones that are immortal, the ones that last forever, are the ones that realize that. And they realize cohesive co-creation is the best path forward.
So if you had to, I assume I know the answer to one and two. What would you say is the third best Sorkin scene from the West Wing? I'm assuming one and two in some order is Bartlett in the Cathedral and Mark Harmon dying. What's three for you?
God, the problem is that there's so many ones that are significant, but you always think about them and like, is it really much more like, again, I come back to the argument. I think it's Toby and I think it's Leo are having on that Christmas episode about the homeless veteran. Like, I think that that's a a moving moment. Um,
It's funny. I have a Christmas. I have two. I have two. I think for me, it's either Josh and Leo in the season two Christmas episode.
yeah, with the whole, yeah,
I've been
that.
here before and I know the way out. Um, it's that, or I think it's actually hilariously, it's Fitz and Leo in the Situation Room because it's the one time Leo is like actually genuinely rattled, and I think the entire show
Yeah.
because he did not expect Fitz to say that. And he walked in that room saying, "There's zero chance I'm doing this," and he walks out of that room being like, "Fuck it, I have to." And
Yeah.
oh, it's so good. It's so good. The way that's what Sorkin can do, man. The way he writes that, the way he writes the build up, the joke at the
And
beginning. Do you know the difference between peacetime and wartime? And Leo knows where it's going, and he still does it anyways. Oh, it's so good.
yeah, he really does do that kind of two-person dialogue well. Like, I think another one that's good, it's not on the same level, but it's when he's meeting with the I can't remember what made up Middle Eastern country they created, Kumar, and he's meeting with the ambassador and his lawyer is like, "Oh, just be a minute," and the lawyer is like, "Oh, I understand you can't say anything, to condemn Israel during the election and this, that, the other thing." And Leo just starts laughing and says, "What you think, that's what's stopping us, the election? You know how we win the election right now?" He takes Abu Sharif into Times Square, shoots him in the head, and walks across the street to get Nathan's hot dog. Like, it's like those sorts of moments where everything builds and then things turn. And as you said, like there's that mix of kind of humor, but there's a seriousness behind it. like again, it all just works. The problem is, as you said, the connective tissue is lacking.
Yeah, no, it's just such a good writer of scenes, such a bad writer of shows.
Yeah, that works.
I'm very glad.
That
I'm very
works.
glad you didn't say you didn't say my least favorite Aaron Sorkin scene of all time, which people seem to think is good. When he eviscerates the conservative talk radio host,
Oh, that's awful.
it's so bad.
That's
It's just
that
such a
is.
straw character built for liberals to masturbate about how much better they are.
I was about to say it is 100% progressive leftist masturbatory fantasy. And it is like when people talk about the West Wing being toxic for our politics, as a progressive, that is like at the core of the issue because it creates this thought of every progressive thing. So all I have to do is be really smart and witty and have these smart, witty quips that undermine their belief structure. And then they'll have no choice but to clap and applaud and agree with me. And it's like, no, that's not how any of this works. It's not how it convinces them. It's not how it convinces their parties and people. No one's going to do that. This is, if you tried to do this in real life, even assuming you had even like half the presence of Martin Sheen doing that scene, it would not work.
Nope.
And that's what people don't understand. Anyways, yeah, no, I agree. I me who was like 13 watching the show for the first time back when it aired, yeah, it's like, oh, woohoo, you go, that's great. Me as, even a college kid watching that show, I'm like, that doesn't work. No.
That scene in the Let Bartlett Be Bartlett stuff from the end of season one are the two like if you still think that's like a coherent message for politics, like you are like, oh my god, I will judge you if you
I,
don't understand with age how bad those two scenes are. And
I'm
God,
I'm happy for that to be baby's first politics and to air it for like teenagers and to give them some sense of aspirational idealism, and then we just slowly choke it out of
yeah, exactly. That's when you introduce Iannucci to kill all of that optimism that you've built up through Sorkin. Robert Glasgow, partner at McCarthy's. We reiterated this at the top, but none of what was said in this was legal opinion. He is not your lawyer. He's also not an American lawyer, so it's double the case. You can't sue him for anything he said, but you can yell at him on Twitter at the Trade Law Guy, especially for his Aaron Sorkin opinions, even though his Sorkin opinions are entirely correct. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Subscribe to my Substack at scrimshawscripted.substack.com. Consider a paid subscription if you would like to support my work and keep the Scrimshaw Strategic Booze Reserve going as we cover national unity crisis in Alberta, a Quebec election next year, and a cavalcade of new measures from Mark Carney. Watch me crash out live over the things that I hate. Watch me praise the things that I love, and support me all the way through. Subscribe to this YouTube channel so you're listening on YouTube. Obviously, most people I assume will be listening on Substack. Robert Glasgow, thank you so much for coming on, buddy.
it. Thank you.